We're always told a strong dollar is great news, right? A sign of a powerful economy. But what if I told you that for a lot of businesses, that strength is actually a huge problem? That's what we're getting into today, the currency paradox.
All right, let's just cut to the chase. Is a strong currency really always a good thing? I mean, on the surface, yeah, of course. Your vacation is cheaper, that cool gadget from overseas costs less. But think about it from the other side. If you're a company trying to sell your products to the rest of the world, a strong dollar can be an absolute killer.
So to really get why this is such a big deal, we're not going to start with some dry academic theory. Nah, let's look at a real-world company facing a very real problem. Let's see how these currency swings can corner a business.
Okay, so let's talk about a company called Nucor. They're a US steel company. And for our first example, let's keep things super simple. Imagine everything they spend money on. Their workers, their raw materials, the electricity to run the factory, it's all paid for in good old US dollars. They're making steel in the USA and hoping to sell it to someone in, I don't know, let's say Switzerland. Okay, now look at this. This is where it gets crazy. In the beginning, in period 1 US dollar gets you 2 Swiss francs. Simple enough. So a Swiss buyer pays 1,000 francs for a ton of Nucor's steel. But then, boom, the dollar gets super strong. It doubles in value. Now, $1 gets you 4 Swiss francs. And just look at that bottom line. For that Swiss buyer, the price of the exact same steel just shot up from 1,000 to 2,000 francs. Doubled. Nucor didn't change a thing back in their US factory, but overnight, they've been priced out of the market. Their competitiveness just got totally wiped out.
So if you're Nucor, what do? You can't just give up. You get clever. You get strategic. You think, okay, instead of buying all our stuff here in the US, what if we start buying some of our raw materials, say scrap iron, from Switzerland, and we pay for it in Swiss francs? This is a game changer.
And this table shows you exactly why that move was so smart. Okay, let's run this same scenario. The dollar appreciates by 100% again. But this time, because part of Nucor's costs are already in francs, that part doesn't get more expensive for the Swiss buyer. So what's the end result? The final price for the steel still goes up, yeah, but only by 64%, not 100. They're still not as competitive as they were, but they've softened the hit a lot. It's like they built a financial shock absorber right into their supply chain.
So what Nucor did was pretty clever, for sure. But that's just scratching the surface. Other companies have taken this idea and just run with it, building these incredibly complex systems that we now call the global supply chain.
Let's rewind to the early 1990s. For Japanese companies that sold stuff abroad, it was a total nightmare. The Japanese yen appreciated like crazy, almost 40% against the US dollar. Imagine you're a company like Hitachi, selling TVs all over the world. Suddenly, for your American customers, your products are 40% more expensive. That's not a problem. That's a potential catastrophe.
But Hitachi's response was, honestly, a work of art. A masterclass in global strategy. Just look at how they did this. To build one TV for the American market, they got the really high-tech stuff, the semiconductors, from Japan, paying in yen. Okay. But then they sourced the picture tubes from their own factory in the US, paying in dollars. The frame, the chassis, that came from Malaysia, also paid for in dollars. And where did they put it all together? Mexico, paying the workers in pesos. So what was the final result of this global puzzle? Only about a third of the TV's total cost was actually tied to that super strong yen. They basically made their product immune to currency swings. They currency-proofed it.
Okay, so we've seen how companies get creative to defend themselves against a strong currency. But that flips the whole question on its head, right? If a strong currency hurts your exports, does that mean a weak currency could actually be a good thing? Maybe even a secret weapon?
Let's put it another way. Is intentionally making your currency weaker the ultimate economic cheat code? A way to supercharge your exports and fix your trade balance. It seems so simple, right? Make your products cheaper and the world will buy more of them. But, as with most things in economics, it's just not that straightforward. It turns out, whether this whole weak currency strategy actually works comes down to one really important economic rule. A rule that tells you if selling things cheaper will actually make you more money in the long run.
And here it is. It's called the Marshall-Lerner condition. I know it sounds super academic and complicated, but the main idea is actually pretty simple. It all boils down to the word elasticity. That's just an economist's way of saying, how much do people care about price changes? So this rule says that weakening your currency will only help you if, and this is a big if foreigners are super sensitive to your now cheaper prices and buy a ton more of your stuff, And if your own people are super sensitive to the now more expensive foreign goods and buy a lot less of them.
This makes it really easy to see. On the left, high sensitivity, or elastic. Think about something like a luxury handbag. If the price drops just a little, sales might go through the roof. Now, on the right, you have low sensitivity, inelastic. Think about insulin or some life-saving medicine. A price change isn't going to make people buy much more or less of it, they just need it. So for the weak currency trick to work, your country's exports need to behave more like that luxury handbag and less like the medicine.
But, of course, there's always a but. Even if the math seems to work out perfectly, there are a couple of big, messy, real-world problems that can throw a wrench in the whole thing. Things like time delays and what I like to call broken signals. The clean theory doesn't always survive contact with reality. First up is something called the J-curve effect. And it's exactly what it sounds like. When a country weakens its currency, its trade balance doesn't just get better right away. Nope. First, it actually gets worse. It takes a dip before it, hopefully, starts to curve back up. It literally traces the shape of the letter J.
So why the dip? Why the delay? Well, think about how business actually works in the real world. First, there's a recognition lag. It takes time for people to even notice prices have changed. Then there's a decision lag. You got to find new suppliers, place new orders. Then the delivery lag, waiting for the stuff to actually show up. Then you have to use up your old, more expensive inventory. That's the replacement lag. And finally, you have to ramp up your own factories to meet this new demand, the production lag. Each one of these steps takes time, sometimes months.
Okay, the second problem is a little sneakier. The price signal itself gets, well, muffled. It's like a bad cell phone connection. The currency might change a lot, but that change doesn't fully make it to the price tag you see in the store. This is called exchange rate pass-through.
And this chart really shows you what I mean. In the US, the pass-through rate is only about 0.42. So what does that mean? It means if the dollar's value changes by, say, 10%, the price you pay for an imported product only changes by about 4%. Why? Because so much of that final price is made up of local stuff. Shipping from the port, marketing, the retailer's profit, things the exchange rate has no effect on. The signal gets seriously diluted.
Which really brings us full circle, back to this quote that just perfectly sums up our modern economy. It connects all the dots. When a product isn't made in America or made in China anymore but made in the world, then a change in any one country's currency just doesn't have the same punch it used to. The costs are spread out everywhere, across all these different currencies, just like we saw with that Hitachi TV. And that leaves us with a really big and honestly a fascinating question to chew on. If these global supply chains have fundamentally weakened the link between exchange rates and prices, what does that mean for how governments run their economies? In this made-in-the-world era, are those old-school currency wars trying to devalue your way to prosperity? Are they basically obsolete? It's a heck of a thing to think about. Thanks for tuning in.